Welcome to the Node.js Build Working Group meeting for November 19, 2019. We didn't have too much in the pre-tagged agenda, so we just had a few suggestions, and I think we're just going to walk through those. Actually, the first question was if we, and this was from Rich in the issue, I was just wondering, I guess, who we're going to get to Node plus JS Interactive. I guess the idea is maybe we can figure out if there's, time to make a face-to-face or have a collaborator summit or something like that. So I'm going to be there. Is anybody else going to make it?
I'm probably going to be there. Looks like about 90% now.
Okay. Okay, so they'll add that into the issue. Don't think we're going to have a huge contingent there, so we can think about that. Okay, moving on to the next thing. I guess the first one was just an update on the work you did, Rod, trying to get Docker working for the test CI. I think it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about that, and it sounded like it didn't go quite as well as we would have liked, but
yeah. Look, I was really excited about this because I thought it was a way to simultaneously offer more to collaborators while doing less on our end.
Right.
And by shifting the burden from VMs that we have to manage with Ansible and all the rest of it, and all the people time and SSH and all the rest of it, to Docker images and scripted in in a YAML file that would sit in the node root, like Travis and GitHub Actions, so that the collaborators can manage it mostly, and we just have to make sure that the infrastructure is there to run it, and also do a little bit of gatekeeping on what Docker images are run, but mostly it's fairly safe. So yeah, and then we could downgrade, so we could downsize the number of VMs we have just to some critical ones like Common Ubuntu, and put other ones like Fedora and even Debian into images, and then just maintain a pool of Docker hosts to run enough of this stuff. So all working really well, like the whole thing, great, except as soon as you want to do parallel compiles, so -J2, just to make it reasonably fast, you get occasional failures with timeouts. There's something about make inside a Docker container running parallelism that it gets into some weird race condition, and it locks up. Well, it doesn't actually lock up. It just stops. It thinks it's waiting for a child process. Child processes are dead and maybe finished, I suppose. It's hard to tell. And it doesn't continue. And I have tried so many things to make this work, and I also don't understand why this isn't a more common problem, and is it something particular about the way I'm doing it? But I have tried so many different configurations of running Docker, running things inside of Docker, init systems, doing all sorts of things to try and get this to be happy, but it just won't.
With different Docker hosts, or
that's the thing I haven't tried yet. This has all been on Ubuntu 18.04, which you would think is stable. Right. It could be specific to the specific version of Docker that I'm using, because I've had problems with Docker in the past where they've released a bad version, and like that, they haven't exactly been the most stable thing.
Right.
You sort of find a version that works, and then you're careful to upgrade it. I have found that on the ARM hosts as well. So it could be that a new version of Docker might help if one comes out, maybe downgrading, or a different Docker host. And so that's the thing I haven't tried. But that's pretty much all I've got left to try. Okay. I've exhausted everything else I can think of to do this. As I had a conversation with Sam in the GitHub issues, Ninja was fine. I haven't seen this same problem with Ninja, but Ninja is just one of the things we need to test.
Right.
most commonly people use make, and so we want to use make as much as possible. But the fact that it's make and Ninja doesn't have this problem, just highlights this being a make problem. And I have found on the make issue tracker, there's a bunch of bugs related to race conditions, and make is such a, like, it hardly gets released ever. So I don't have any hope of this being something that will be fixed. And also it's different versions of make too, because we're running different OSs here, down to CentOS, all the way up to newer version of Ubuntu, so that there are actually different versions of make in play here. So I throwing up my hands at this one. So
It's
I've
also,
let it sit for now.
I wouldn't guess that it's in make. Just, I have a big machine where we run like 50 or 100 in parallel, and it never hangs out like that.
No, it's not. I think it's a combination of make running in a particular environment. Something about the Docker environment. Some signal is not being sent. Some message is not being passed. Some state is not present in this particular environment. But as much as I've changed the environment, I can't get it to. And this happens across lots of different versions of Linux within containers. So the other thing is, it could just be kernel. This could just be a particular kernel, and so maybe leaving in a few weeks, new kernel. So I'll next time I tackle this, I'll blow away the machines I was using to test it on, and start some new Docker hosts, and see if that makes a difference. If it does, great. We can proceed to thinking about rolling this out. If not, I just don't. This is not a yak I have the time or much more energy left to shave. I've done too much shaving of it already.
How easy is it to recreate?
The issue?
Yeah. Like, how many times are you going to have to run?
It's about something like 1 in 15 or 1 in 20, maybe. Yeah, no, about that. Like I'll start a batch of jobs, and there might be what are we up to? About 10 jobs in a CI run that I've got so far, and most of them will pass, but one of them will stop, and then it'll wait for the Jenkins timeout trigger at 30 minutes to say, "No, you've had enough. Kill you." So it's probably between 1 in 10 and 1 in 20, but reliable enough that my Jenkins job for this thing is all red.
Right. I was just curious, like, because I know the team that we have doing our S390 stuff wanted to look at using Docker. So I thought, if they have time, I might ask if they can easily recreate it as well.
Well, all the scripting and everything is, and the containers, the Docker files, they're all open, they're all up. But if somebody needs to try and,
but in theory, if
it's
a pervasive issue, it's just create a Docker, like create a container, start a container, run clone node, run make build, and if you do that 20 times, it should fail, right?
Yes, except we're talking about the Jenkins environment here too, which is you're running from within a Java service that doesn't have a TTY. Oh, well, it's got a fake TTY, so that there could be an interaction with TTY here as well, with standard out, standard in. I've tried those variations with Docker as well, saying don't allocate standard in, allocate TTY, all those sort of things. But Docker, we have found that with other issues completely unrelated to Docker, where just running in the Jenkins environment, the fact that it's got a Java parent and the way that it sets up has caused problems with tests. So it may not be something you can just reproduce in the terminal. It may need to be detached.
Right. So it could be related to running under Jenkins as well.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, if they have some side, well, hopefully it sounds like you're going to take another shot if there's a new version of Docker or whatever. So that if that just fixes it, great. Otherwise, if the team has some time, I'll suggest to see if they can recreate it, because that would at least be a first step.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll update GitHub as I get back to that experiment, but for now it's on hold.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Doesn't sound good, but it's good to sort of get an update on where that's going. Next thing I wanted to bring up and how we could have a bit of a discussion of is, and a bit of an FYI, I guess, is that if you've been watching the repo, you'll notice that Google has worked on compressed pointers, and they're currently looking to, I think, switch the default for Chrome over to using compressed pointers. I think my understanding is for their purposes, like 4 gig is enough. They recognize that we would probably need more, but they were talking about 10 or 12 gig as a max heap size. And some of the discussion has been is we're not necessarily sure that that's going to be enough to be the only option, right? So that then leads into the discussion of would we ever, should we have multiple builds, which I know we've talked about on other things, and it's not necessarily something we want to go to do the extra work. But I did want to just bring it up as another thing to be aware of that could push on that in some way. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts in terms of compressed pointers, max heap sizes, that kind of stuff. Like if there was, I mean, is it at all feasible in people's minds here if we had a maximum that was like 10 or 12 gig versus today it's, whatever the address space is.
You want to decrease the maximum size, or?
Well, compressed pointers, basically the idea is that you're using a smaller pointer width, so you end up having a smaller maximum heap size. So like in Chrome, I think what will end up being is that the default will be the maximum heap you could ever have is 4 gig. And at least initially, the concern is not that they're going to delete the option to have the option to have like a non-compressed heap, except that they won't be testing it because Chrome, a lot of the testing comes from Chrome, and Chrome won't be using anything but the compressed 4 gig heaps. And so the question that was coming up is, can we switch Node over to using compressed heaps as well? But it's a build time thing. It's not like you can switch it on or off. Certainly 4 gig I don't think is practical at all, but then it's like, okay, is there a size that is practical? If it's not practical, then it's like, we should probably think about, then you say, well, okay, we could solve it by having both options. But 2 builds is not necessarily an easy thing to manage. Doesn't necessarily address the fact that we don't get good testing either.
So is this a build option? Are we going to be able to even turn this off when V8 ship this?
They've so far it hasn't been like, they haven't said they're going to remove the option to build uncompressed. So it's not like when it's, there's no impending, as far as I understand, there's no impending the option to not be compressed is going to go away. But the concern is that we won't be getting the testing from Chrome, which we normally get. Yeah. The other thing that's in the equation is you actually do get quite a good benefit from using a compressed heap. Like you can, the numbers being thrown out about are something like, 70% of the heap is pointers. So if you half the size of that, you're going to get a pretty good savings.
I can imagine. I wonder, are they claiming speed benefits here? Like startup speed?
I don't think, no. I think it's basically speed can be maintained with some work, and then you get the memory benefit.
Says memory, yeah. I mean, Node has historically had a reputation for memory pain, but I can imagine some people being happy about having this as an option. I can also imagine some very large deployments being frustrated if things are capped.
Like I mean, we did some data gathering when it was being brought up, and it's like there's definitely deployments out there using like 10 gig and more. So saying a maximum of 4 would be would not be that work. That would certainly be an issue for them. I mean, one thing that came up is like, would it make sense for, say, like the Alpine Docker image to use compressed by default? You know, in that it's already targeted at smaller environments.
Well, no, it's targeted at people who don't want to pull down all of Ubuntu when they deploy a Node app. It doesn't mean that the data they're processing is small, I don't think. They just want smaller Docker images. I think it's really hard to know. Like if we decrease any size, I think we'll probably discover at least some number of people who are using that much memory. So it's kind of a question of how painful it'll be for them, or how many of them there are. It's really difficult to take a feature away from a person when they're running it in production. But
absolutely, and I'd also worry about limiting where a node can be used, right? You know, you don't want to say, sorry, when you get to a certain size, it's just no longer useful because there's this limit on the heap.
I think maybe this needs us to have the option to build something and to see the implications and measure it and then get feedback. It just seems like this is a lot of this, the discussion would be otherwise guesswork. I certainly can't make any informed.
Right. I think that's
opinions about
definitely going to happen. Matteo had already built it and said, hey, on his little test app, he got 40% improvement in heap size. And probably one of our first steps is like adding the option to the node build to be able to build one way or the other.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You go, Rod, go. You were talking.
No, I'm just going to say, if we had the option to build, then people in the wild could be building it compressed, and then we could get feedback from that, rather than us jumping to decide that this is what people need. That would probably be my inclination, but perhaps it's really compelling and we just need to play with it.
I would be interested in benchmark data, because changing the size of the heap could, like if you're hitting less cache lines, historically there is a trend in which you make your data smaller and your heap usage smaller. It fits into more cache lines and things work faster. So it's not impossible that it actually runs faster, which would make it even more compelling. But like Rod says, we would need some data on that.
Yeah, I think the message was, you know, there might be a small perf cost.
Yeah, they have to do encoding and decoding of these pointers by the look of it. From
right. I mean, one of the questions is that it's like each isolate gets its own heap. So there is some offsetting, like even if you have a pointer, you've got to do something which is either, you know, a relative addition, or so you've got some extra work for sure. And I think to expand it beyond 4 gig, there would probably be even a little bit more, because then you have to do some additional shifting potentially. So I mostly wanted to bring it up in this context in terms of, you know, it could be some, you know, another reason why the discussion around multiple more builds would come up, because it's not something that, you know, that it can't be a runtime option. It has to be a build time option. And so if there's reasons that we need both, you know, it's well, the only thing you can think of is like, can we have an extra, you know, build one which is compressed, one which is not? You might come up with ways to package them into one build, but then you end up with a bigger build size. So anyway, there'll probably be some discussion on that front.
So just looking at that issue that Richard gave us a link to,
yep.
It sounds like there's ABI concerns here. That's one of the bigger blockers. So
I thought external ABI was supposed to be compatible, but is that you're saying that when the test, some things failed?
Well, there's discussion in there, and even Electron's piping up saying that they like the idea, but ABI instability is a problem. Although, I mean, Hashseed gets in there and said the plan was to consider having a build flag in V8 that ensures ABI stability regardless of whether compression is enabled or not by sacrificing some performance, since inline implemented APIs would need to be replaced with non-inline versions. So the plan was to.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
that's what I thought I'd heard. And what, even in the recent discussions, it was around like, it's not. It was going to be ABI compatible, and only like, externally the pointers would be the larger size, but
then they would go through a wrapping process, which would that would be a perfect fit for add-ons. But yeah.
Right. So, okay. So things, well, yeah. So for existing add-ons, you'd have to definitely recompile.
Well, his point being there that you wouldn't be able to inline during compile. You'd have to, that the wrapping process would create enough infrastructure in the code that you wouldn't be able to inline the calls like you can currently.
Right. Okay.
But then again, dealing with the V8, you're dealing with large costs anyway, so maybe those would be negligible. But yeah, the point there being ABI stability would be something that we would care a bit about.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, maybe it would be good to get this flag merged, and so we can just at least play with it. I'm going to review that and say approve, because that'd be good to, yeah.
Right. Yeah. An API is going to be unaffected, but there's still lots of other modules. Okay. So yeah, I think we've covered the sort of FYI and talked about the, multiple builds, whatever. It's still got a lot of discussion just in Node Core as well. Any other questions, comments before we move on to the next topic? Okay. The next one was a quick overview of the new metrics. I've seen quite a bit of work by Johan and Rod in terms of moving over that, and I thought it would be good just to give an FYI to the rest of the build work.
Yep. Quick background, we started hitting limits on our main web server. We think that it was that specific to that droplet, which was specific to that hardware. We were hitting a 2 gig network limit, like it was maxing out. And that was probably to do with, we have this constant growing traffic in Node.js.org. It's like over time, currently anyway, we're pretty much guaranteed for that traffic to grow. And we've recently increased the size of binaries, and so that has, pushed that as well. And so just in terms of that constant growth, we hit a point now where we were hitting a 2 gig limit, apparently. We did get the droplet moved to new hardware, but we haven't reached the same bandwidth on that new hardware as previously. So we can't be sure that was a problem, because in the meantime we did sort it out by other means. I did a bunch of tuning on the machine, to rule out other problems, but it just seems to come down to a hardware problem. So that put pressure back on us getting rid of the cache bypass for Node.js.org with Cloudflare, which we have in place so that we get download metrics coming through. So we worked through Johan's contacts at Cloudflare. He's got some very good contacts at Cloudflare, because he's been doing a ton of enterprise work in Latin America, and he's been pretty good for business for them, I think. So he's got some good contacts there now. And we got log push enabled on our account, which is an enterprise feature. So the Cloudflare have been very good to us. They've given us a few enterprise features. Log pull was the one they previously gave us, and we just couldn't make it work reliably enough, where we pull the logs down from their servers so that we have copies of them. I did spend quite a bit of time a couple of years ago, I think it was, trying to make that work, and I just couldn't make it reliable enough that where I was comfortable enough to say, yes, let's flip this thing on and then let it run, and then we can be assured that we're getting all the logs we want. And I never had time to revisit that. So log push, on the other hand, puts the onus on Cloudflare to push the logs to us. We have to have a S3 compatible storage location, though. That was the catch, which there's various means we could have done it. We could have got that through Azure, through GCP, and I think IBM might offer one as well, and SoftLayer maybe.
I would think we do, to be honest,
Yeah.
but we didn't check, so.
Yeah, so Miles had talked in the past about giving us some credits on GCP, and Johan, we without chasing that up directly, Johan decided that he was going to donate resources anyway because he thought it wouldn't be much. So he set up a bucket on his account. He's given us a couple of us access to that bucket, and we've enabled log push. We are collecting particular fields on every request through Node.js.org, and they're going into files. I think every 5 minutes, maybe we get a file. That's a JSON delimited file with the fields that we want. And I ran some tests and wrote some scripts and have a server set up to run these that could confirm that we were getting the same data that we were getting from Node.js.org, from our own logs. And I was satisfied enough with that we switched it on. So now we have a full cache bypass from turned off, sorry. Full caching enabled on Cloudflare now. Most of our traffic now is served from Cloudflare itself. Our backend servers are not doing much work, except when things are flushed. Like if you have a new website deploy or a new release, then it gets flushed, but it's really not that big a deal. So that's working. The storage bucket is turning out to be taking more. The storage is not that much of a cost, but the synchronizing of it is. So I have a script that runs that synchronizes onto a server so that we can run these scripts. That's turning out to be more costly than we anticipated. So we approached Miles. Miles is apparently running Node.js.dev or is it Node.dev on GCP, and so we have an account there and credits, and so he has topped us up with credits for this. So we are now running on GCP donated resources. And we haven't hooked up the pipeline. So nodejs.org/metrics is not updated with latest data. It's only updated with what's on the server. So it's wrong. But I decided that was not particularly high priority, that could be got to. And people don't usually complain when that gets out of date, which tells you something about the priority. So that's where it is. There's a few things more to do, but mostly the hard bits are done, and the server is in a better state, and our website is faster and more reliable. So all good.
Okay, I guess I didn't. The not being updated, I am using those to do like monthly reports up our org chain. So
okay,
I'm going to get some complaints.
So the next steps with that are, so I have scripts now. The original ones are done with awk and a little bit of Python, I think, for geolocation, but we can now do it all in just JavaScript. Johan wants to set up a GCP worker. So that would run, it's like basically a container that's run whenever a new file is dropped.
Right.
And we could run that each time rather than having it on cron, hourly cron like we do currently. So we would run this in the worker, and the scripts would run, and we'd get the files that we need and then aggregate them there. So that's the plan. I need to talk to Johan about how hard that is to get there. Because the intermediate one is to use this server that I set up and do it manually. So that I can pull that off if need be. I just don't know what the best use of my time is at the moment, given that we're not likely to be doing it that long term.
Right. I guess
So
it's
good for you to know that the data is stale now,
Yeah.
so don't use it for reports.
right. Well, I guess I was doing it monthly, so I guess I would find there's no recent monthly data, right?
Yeah. So maybe keep the pressure on myself and Johan for that to make sure it gets done.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the next step is to figure out the approach, right? Because I was going to, if it's something like writing some JavaScript or some awk or whatever, we might even ask Ashley if he has some time to help.
I actually think I have most of it done. It's the I'm generating the raw log files that are used to generate those summaries. So it's really just a matter of a bit of SCP to put them on the web server and then run the summary scripts. So it's really a matter of just wiring it all together, and just a bit of tedium that I avoided because it wasn't high enough priority. So I could do that. The caveat there is the biggest cost to this GCP bucket that Johan was struggling with was not storage. It was the bandwidth, I think, of pulling the logs out of the bucket. I think that was it, which is onto the server that I have running. I have a cron job on the server that just synchronizes the bucket.
Right.
Apparently that is the biggest cost, which is interesting.
Because it's a lot of data, I guess.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But we've got those GCP credits, which should give us, which should tide us over and make that less of a big deal. But it does point towards needing to do this within GCP, ideally.
Right, because then you don't have to do, then you would just push the summaries as opposed to anything else, right?
Yeah, and because the data we're collecting now is way more than we ever collected before, because it's every request. Whereas before we were only collecting data for the downloads. Other stuff was bypassed. So
I see.
We only really want the download stuff, although
Right.
now we have everything. If we wanted to do other analysis on it, we could.
Okay.
But it's a lot of traffic, just requesting, HTML and images.
Okay. Well, I guess it sounds like if there is something we could help out on that front, let me know.
Okay. What we'll do, let me. You might have to remind me if this drops off my.
Sure. If like I now give like a report every month, so I'll be reminded once a month.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try and revisit this and remind myself how hard it was to finalize the wiring of it to make it work regularly.
Okay. Because it's basically the equivalent of what used to scrape the Nginx logs and generate the summaries, right?
Yeah, and I think so. The way I left it was I'm generating the same logs now from the Cloudflare stuff as we were from the Nginx logs. That's where I've left it. So all I need to do is just replace that process where it took the Nginx log. Because the tricky bit here is that we want to meld historical and new data for all those summaries. So we want to make sure we retain old and add new to it. So it's not just a matter of just wiping away what we had. We have to import what we had and make sure the pipeline is set up so that it's all there. But it shouldn't be hard. It really shouldn't be hard.
Right, because
the
it's
hard work
basically
is done.
Like at least the stuff I was using was just files, right, with data. So it'd be tacking those extra lines into the existing files or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, I need to make a I need to have like an archive directory of this is all of the Nginx logs up until this particular date where we switched it off, and then use those files for the old stuff if we ever need to touch them again. And then this is the new file. The new files come from here. And there needs to be a point in time where the old files stop and the new files start.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of cron to push and yeah. Were you using the summary files? Just the summary.csv files?
Yeah, like I'm just basically pulling up the total downloads by platform, like by Linux, by operating system, and by architecture.
Right. Okay.
So I want to pull out and say like last month there was like 10 million for x86 and 1 million for whatever else, and so forth.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last topic I had was just a quick update on the request to the board for help. You know, since our last meeting where we discussed that, we did brainstorm through email and so forth, job description, which is one of the requests. So I sent that on, and I have a set of, you know, slides I'm going to present at the board meeting this Friday, just to give a little bit more context, which was the other ask. And then, you know, it'll be back on the board front to say, okay, what can we do on to address the request. So that's the things that I had for the agenda. I don't know if anybody else has any other things that they've thought of since we've been talking. If not, then I think we could call the meeting for today. Okay, well, we'll talk to everybody later then.
Yeah, cheers, y'all.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.